Korea and Australia are really different in a lot of ways. We're actually really similar in a lot of ways, but today's video is going to be about the differences. What will number one be? Well, let's find out. 준비, go! Number 10 on the top 10 biggest differences between Korea and Australia, in my opinion, is the couple culture. When you're in Korea, you'll notice that a lot of the couples wear matching t-shirts, matching outfits. If you go anywhere on the weekend, you're bound to see a lot of couples wearing matching outfits like these guys here. But in Australia, dude, if you did this, maybe some people would like it, but man, I don't think I would do this in Australia out of fear of being judged by everyone, including my family. Another big difference between couples in Australia and Korea is the 100-day celebration. See, in Australia, we don't celebrate 100 days. We only celebrate in terms of months. So it's 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, but I like it. I like the 100-day celebration. The more celebrations, the better. 100일, 100일, 나 좋아합니다. Next, we have number 9, which is, what do you think it is? That's right, 술 문화. So in Australia, we definitely drink a lot of alcohol. We probably mostly drink beer, I would say. You usually go out with your friends to a bar or a pub or at home. In Korea, drinking is like next level. Soju, 막걸리, 맥주, 또 있나? 있지. But a big difference between Australia and Korea is the price. One bottle of soju in Korea is probably like 1,500, maybe like 2,000won. But in Australia, you'd probably pay up to like 15,000won just for one bottle of soju. Crazy, just for one bottle of soju. Our tax on alcohol is so high here in Australia, but it's really low back in Korea. Another big difference between the drinking culture is 회식. In Australia, we do this usually on Friday, it'd be like Friday drinks. But the difference is in Korea, a lot of people get really drunk at these things, and it's even encouraged and sometimes even forced by the managers and the bosses to get you drunk. In Australia, that would never happen. It's probably illegal. Another big difference that I noticed in Australia is that when guys drink, in Australia, usually they get pretty aggressive. Whereas in Korea, guys don't really get that aggressive. There's definitely a lot less violence associated with alcohol in Korea. It seems like even though a lot of people get really drunk all the time, in Korea, it's really safe. It seems really safe. Number 8 is, what is it? 외국인, 외국 사람들. Foreigners in Korea are very different to foreigners in Australia, and here's why. Foreigners in Australia could be anyone. You don't know who is a foreigner. You can't tell by looking at their face. You can usually tell when you hear their voice. If they have an accent, that is how you tell if they're a foreigner or not. Whereas in Korea, there's Koreans, then there's 외국인s, and 외국인 means foreigner. In Korea, everybody knew that I was a foreigner, but if a Korean was to come to Australia, not everybody would know that they were a Korean. They might think, oh, you're Australian, you're second generation or third generation Australian. Next in the top 10 is this. When you see this photo, what do you think of? That's right, pop culture or K-pop. K-pop is amazing. I love K-pop. I love Blackpink, BTS. I used to love 소녀시대 and Tiara, 4 Minute, After School. I loved Big Bang, Kara. I was that generation. Good times, good memories. Korea has this amazing pop culture, K-pop and K-drama, which is like super globally successful, as you know. But in Australia, we don't really have that. Like, as you can see in the picture, the guy here is Gotye, and he had a smash hit single, someone that I used to know a few years ago. But apart from that, we don't really have many globally successful songs or artists. The underground or the alternative music scene in Australia is really big. When it comes to pop, like popular music, popular culture, Australia is not great, let's be honest. Whereas Korea have some of the most famous bands in the world, like BTS and Blackpink, globally successful, globally renowned. Blackpink, BTS, fighting. Love you so much. Love you, love you, love you. Coming in number 6, we have housing. 주택 versus apartment. So obviously in Australia, a lot of people actually live in houses instead of apartments, but in Korea, especially in Seoul, a lot of people live in apartment buildings. This is a massive, massive difference because in Australia, you generally have a lot more space, like physical space. You can have space for a garden. You have space for a garage. You have space for a pool, a backyard. When I was studying in Korea, I actually stayed in a goshwon. Goshwon is a really small apartment building for students. It's usually pretty cheap, but it's really, really small. The one that I was staying in was 3 meters by 2 meters, and it contained a desk, a bed, and a shower, and a toilet. It was so cramped, it was crazy. Because in Australia, most people live in houses or housing estates rather than apartment buildings, the streets are a lot quieter. So if I go outside right now, I bet there would be no one on the streets or hardly anyone. It would be dead quiet, no people. But when I lived in Korea, especially when I lived in the Goshiwon, there were so many people on the streets all the time. It was good. It has pros and cons. Coming in at number 5 is the style of churches, 교회 style. So in Korea, at least from my experience, the churches are much more conservative. They do have the biggest church in the world, which is in Yeouido. Churches in Australia range so rapidly from, Pentecostal churches like Hillsong and Planet Shakers, which are very modern, a lot of young people, very cool and trendy. And then at the other end of the scale is the more traditional, usually more conservative churches. I love going to church in Australia because it's very free. You're free to worship how you want to worship. The music is amazing. There's a wide variety of music. And a lot of it sounds like pop music like you'd hear on the radio. Whereas at least from my experience in Korea, I think church is much more conservative. It's almost like an older person's religion in Korea. Whereas in Australia, a lot of young people actually go to church. Coming in at number 4, we have 외모, or appearances. So what I mean by this is the importance of beauty and the beauty standards in Australia and Korea are very different. So if you're an Australian guy, you probably don't have a skincare routine. I highly doubt you have a skincare routine. If it is, it would be washing your face with water, then drying it, then going to bed. That's a good routine. But in Korea, it's pretty common for a guy to invest, time and money into a really good skincare routine. And you can tell because Korean guys' skin is so good. And I want to use men as an example because it's very different in Korea as to Australia. So in Korea, it'd be very common to wear something like a BB cream, even a bit of makeup, just to make your skin look a bit better. Whereas Australian guys don't really care about skincare, let's be honest. Man, number 3 is a big one. Number 3 is this. Yep, you know it. 직장 생활. Working in Korea versus working in Australia is different. It's really different. In Korea, people work hard. People work really hard and really long. But in Australia, we usually have what's called a 9-to-5 job, whereas you work from 9 and you finish at 5, and you start exactly at 9 and you will finish exactly at 5. It's not uncommon for people to be packing up their things at 4:50, 4:55, so that they can leave right on the dot at 5 o'clock. Definitely Koreans work longer hours overall, and I think statistically they're one of the top 5 countries in the world. In Korea, there's the concept of yagen, which literally means to work at night. And in my experience, I didn't really personally do much yagen, but I know a lot of people did. And it's definitely not uncommon to work until 9, 10, 11, 12, even early in the morning, just to satisfy your boss, pretty much. When it comes to working in Australia versus working in Korea, man, there's so many differences, but I think 2 more big ones would be, 1, the minimum wage in Australia is really high compared to Australia. And 2, when people work at a company, usually in Korea you work as a team, whereas in Australia it's more common to work separately or individually. Coming in at number 2 is, student life, 학생 생활. Can I say that? 학생 생활? 모르겠어. Korean students study like crazy. I think they must be the hardest studying students in the world. And the exam that they have at the end of the year, I forget what it's called. 뭐지? 모르겠다. 기억 안 나. Honestly, in my experience of studying in Australia, I didn't study after school until probably year 11, year 12, which is 고2 or 고3. Up until year 11, as soon as I finished school, I would go and I would play sport, I'd play games, I'd do something else, but I wouldn't study. It's definitely much more normal in Australia to go and play a sport after school instead of studying really long hours. We've made it. We've made it to number 1. The number 1 difference between Korea and Australia, in my personal opinion, is this. That's right. Animals. No, it's not animals. It's 바리바리 문화, or you could call it lifestyle, I guess. Everything in Korea is fast. From the delivery, if you order something online, you get it in the next day. If you order something at a restaurant, you probably won't have to wait more than 10 minutes before it comes out. In Australia, you'd be waiting 30, 40, 1 hour sometimes just for some food to come out at a restaurant. Also, I've noticed that Koreans, when they go on holidays, they do it very quickly. They pack the schedule, a 1-week schedule, and go to 7 different countries in Europe. But Australians will take it much more slow. They'll choose like one destination and spend like the whole week in that one destination, taking it really slow. Life in general is at a much slower pace in Australia, whereas in Korea, everything is fast, fast, fast. One of the benefits of this is that because of this 빨리빨리 문화, I think the Korean economy has been able to grow really quickly over a short amount of time. It's what we call the 한강의 기적, or the miracle of the Han River. Samsung, LG, Kia, Hyundai, they've been able to grow because their employees work so hard and because the employees work so fast. Wow, that's it. That's the end. Well guys, thank you for watching top 10 differences between Australia and Korea, in my opinion. If you do have any questions, please let me know. Leave a comment, slide in my DMs on Instagram, whatever. Hope you have an amazing day. 동생들, 나의 친구들, 이 영상 봐주셔서 감사합니다. 감사합니다. 감사해 주겠습니다. Okay, bye bye guys. 동생, 화이팅!